Hey everyone, we're going to talk about Lebanon in this video. It'll just be an update of a number of different aspects of what's going on up there. And obviously the thread connecting them all is Lebanon and the way forward. And there's a big picture issue here that of course relates to the war in Iran that we're going to talk about towards the end. So let's get right to it. Let's hit the headlines right away. U.S. insists Israel-Lebanon talks moving in a positive direction despite setback last week. This is from today. State Department says next round of talks to take place in September in Rome will focus on roadmaps for future pilot zones for IDF withdrawal. The next round of U.S.-mediated talks between Israel and Lebanon will take place in early September in Rome, a State Department official announced today, after officials from both countries recognized setbacks during last week's talks. Last week's round of U.S.-sponsored talks ended early on their second day amid an escalation in southern Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah. Beirut is also frustrated with the pace of Israeli withdrawals, feeling that Jerusalem is dragging its feet ahead of October elections, while Israel argues that verification of Hezbollah disarmament must be completed first. Hello, in the agreement between the Lebanese government and the Israelis that was signed back in June, it says explicitly that Israel will only withdraw from areas that are completely cleared out of Hezbollah, and with a verification that in the pilot zones that they've pulled out of, that the Lebanese army is doing an effective job. That verification has not yet happened. Israel is not bound in any way to withdraw any further. The Lebanese government, I said this at the outset, when the deal was signed, I already warned. I said, this is the way it always works. There's going to be pressure on Israel to withdraw. Israel has to hold its ground and not withdraw until the conditions are met. Nonetheless, a State Department spokesperson insisted that the 3 days of talks last week were constructive and saw the sides reach understandings on the parameters that must be met to verify that a particular area has been cleared of Hezbollah infrastructure in order to unlock future pilot zones. In June, Israel and Lebanon agreed to a framework deal that involves the disarmament of Hezbollah, a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from Lebanon's south, and the deployment of Lebanese armed forces to the region, starting in test areas known as pilot zones. So far, 2 such zones exist, with the ultimate goal being that the pilot zones will be replicated to the point where Israel has completely pulled out of southern Lebanon. And let's jump down. At the next round of technical talks, Lebanon will present detailed roadmaps for securing new areas as implementation proceeds in the current pilot zones. The State Department spokesperson said that's wishful thinking. They want that the implementation will continue to proceed in the current pilot zones. Let's see what happens. We need to work through important details, including who verifies the LAF's clearance operations. Once those details are clear, the process will move much faster. This is a major issue, the verification. In fact, reports are coming out now that it was one of the major issues that was discussed at the talks in Rome. Which countries are going to be part of the verification force? It's not going to be UNIFIL. UNIFIL's done with and over. The Lebanese wanted them back. Israel said no. But take a look at what it says here. This is a fascinating, and this is what really led me to say I got to do an update on Lebanon because of this news item, but then there's others. I got some really cool stuff for you in this video, so stick around. Israel and Lebanon still need to agree on a list of countries that will serve on a third-party committee tasked with verifying that pilot zones have been fully demilitarized. Israel and Lebanon need to agree. An official familiar with the matter told the Times of Israel on Monday that Israel is rejecting the inclusion of countries that have sought to act against it in international forums. This was also reported on Channel 14 cable news in Israel. This is a credible report. And listen to the logic behind this. I love this. What's Israel saying? And in the report on Channel 14, I should say it was even more precise. It said that Israel is rejecting the inclusion of countries that have been part of any actions or moves made against Israel in the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, in any of those international bodies. Countries that work against Israel in those bodies, Israel will not agree to them being part of the verification force. And the logic behind it is so sound. That's why I love it so much. Very simple. If you're supportive of the the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, or the ICC, if you are on board with their claims that Prime Minister Netanyahu and other Israeli officials and our chief of staff are guilty of war crimes, if you are embracing the genocide narrative, that means that you are embracing a demonstrable lie about Israel. And there's no way that we can trust you to be an honest arbiter when it comes to verifying that Hezbollah has been disarmed, and so that Israel can comfortably trust that and say that they're willing to withdraw. If you're willing to endorse a lie about Israel, and you might believe it's the truth, doesn't matter. If your worldview is that Israel's committing war crimes, that Israel is committing genocide, that Israel's starving the people of Gaza when they have more than enough food, if you're willing to embrace those lies, knowingly or unknowingly, is immaterial, then there's no way that we can trust you on the verification of Hezbollah, because your view of the whole situation with Israel is skewed. We can't trust you. I love the logic behind it. The State Department spokesperson reiterated Washington's opposition to extending the mandate of UNIFIL, that's the United Nations interim force in Lebanon, or whatever force they're called, their observer force, which it, like Israel, believes has not done a sufficient job in preventing Hezbollah's rearmament. That is an understatement. UNIFIL, over all the years it was in South Lebanon, actively harmed Israel's ability to take actions against Hezbollah, to monitor Hezbollah, to take preemptive action to stop Hezbollah from building its infrastructure. They actively aided and abetted Hezbollah. Quote, "We are not naive about the difficulties. Hezbollah is trying to sabotage the process, and both Israel and Lebanon are democracies under domestic political stress." Yes, Lebanon has a domestic political stress here. The Lebanese government, I understand where they're coming from. They want to show their people that they're getting Israel to withdraw, that they're strong, that they can defend Lebanon. Israel not withdrawing from more areas it's a double whammy for the Lebanese government. It shows that maybe they're not so strong and don't have the ability to secure areas that have been cleared of Hezbollah by Israel that have been given over to them, the pilot zones. And because if Israel's not withdrawing anymore, that means that the program is not being successful. So it shows that they're weak. So they have that problem. It also shows that they can't get Israel to withdraw more, so that they can't show themselves to be defenders of Israel, and the claims against them by the Shiite elements and other anti-Israel elements of Lebanon who say that they're collaborating with Israel in occupying parts of Lebanon, it only feeds that narrative. So they have they're in a tight spot domestically, but that doesn't change that Israel needs to do what it needs to do to defend itself. But the fact that the team sat together, communicated directly, and generated options is itself structural change. The process is designed to absorb those constraints and still move forward, first by making the pilot zones work, then by expanding. Very nice wishful thinking. Now, check out this story, which I kind of missed. It appeared a week ago, 5 days ago, in the New York Post. Hezbollah's summer camps for junior jihadis pose a mortal threat to peace. Check this out. This is from the New York Post. It's summer camp season when kids across America roast marshmallows and compete in games of color war. But in Lebanon, camps run by Iran-backed Hezbollah are preparing children for a holy war instead. Every summer, the terror group's Imam al-Mahdi, remember the Mahdi? That's the 12th Imam who's supposed to come back, their Messiah figure. The Hezbollah's Imam al-Mahdi scout camps indoctrinate Shiite youth and even offer paramilitary training to older members. Scores of former Mahdi scouts have joined Hezbollah's ranks. The Imam al-Mahdi scouts, established in the mid-1980s and recognized by the Lebanese government in 1992, pledged to advance Wilayat al-Fiqh, which is the guardianship of the jurist. That is the basic idea underpinning the Iranian regime, the teachings of Iran's supreme leader. So they're these scouts at this Lebanese Hezbollah summer camp pledged to advance Wilayat al-Fiqh, primarily underwritten by Iran's IRGC. The group now boasts 75,000 registered male and female scouts. This summer, the youngest Mahdi scouts are busy with tug of war, soccer games, cooking potatoes, and campfires. The group's website explains tween members are performing community service, clearing rubble from villages, and preparing care packages for Shiite children displaced by the latest war Hezbollah launched against Israel. But older scouts have a different, decidedly less benign schedule. In July, teenagers and counselors took a field trip to Iran to attend the funeral of Ayatollah Khamenei, who was killed on the first day of the Iran war. When scouts turn 16, they're offered, quote, literacy training, a course in the basics of weaponry. Over the summer, the teenage scouts receive more intensive training in different types of armaments. Early on, campers are taught the values of resistance and sacrifice. In July, the group organized a ceremony to honor former scouts who graduated to join Hezbollah and were killed fighting Israel. Ideological indoctrination starts early, judging by the monthly age-appropriate professional-grade print and online magazines the group produces for its cadres. It produces a monthly magazine for them throughout the year. Preschoolers, for example, can enjoy a pencil maze that challenges them to help a rabbit find its way through a labyrinth of mines planted by Israeli occupation soldiers, or they can collect stickers of Kalashnikovs, grenades, and children waving Hezbollah flags. The education program appears to be working. In October 2025, the Mahdi Scouts organized a commemoration for former Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed by the IDF in September 2024. The event, so this commemoration for Hassan Nasrallah, organized by this scout group, the Mahdi Scouts, held at a 50,000-seat stadium in Beirut, may have been the largest scout jamboree ever. Hezbollah media claimed 74,000 scouts attended. Even if the numbers were exaggerated, it was an impressive turnout and a message that despite sustaining substantial losses in the war against Israel, Hezbollah still has recruits waiting to join the fight. Washington is working closely with the Lebanese government to try to limit Iranian funding for its terror cat's paw, but there's a missing piece in the U.S. strategy: reforming the terrorist ideology that the Mahdi Scouts put on such clear display. It will take time, nerve, and political will for the weak and fractious Lebanese state to supplant Hezbollah institutions in predominantly Shiite areas. In the meantime, just as Beirut has declared Hezbollah's weapons illegal, it must ban the Mahdi Scouts to start dismantling the aspiring martyr pipeline. The group must also be stripped of its international legitimacy. For decades, the Mahdi Scouts have been a member organization of the Lebanese Scouting Federation. Like Scouting America, formerly the Boy Scouts, the Lebanese Federation is a constituent member of World Scouting, the Scout Movement's global organization. So this Hezbollah Scout group, Hezbollah Summer Camp, is part of World Scouting, just like the Boy Scouts or what Scouting America is. Wow. Even an arm's length affiliation with Scouting's official body is an embarrassment to Scouts worldwide, I'll say. Finally, the Trump administration should trigger sanctions against the Mahdi Scouts by designating it a foreign terrorist organization. After all, the group openly declares allegiance to Iran's supreme leader rather than to Lebanon, and its ideological agenda threatens Beirut's aspirations for full sovereignty. If Trump is serious about promoting Israel-Lebanon peace, he should target Hezbollah's farm team. And this is written by David Schenker, who is a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Look, the best way, this just goes back to the whole issue of one of Trump's stated goals when this war started, which you don't hear him talk about as much, which is to dismantle the proxies, the terror network, Iran's proxy network across the region. You see, the easiest way to dry up this summer camp and this scouting and all of this stuff in Lebanon is just end the Iranian regime. That's where all the money for this comes from. We're going to get into that in the next piece we look at. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that you are aware of this very important webinar that we are hosting this coming Sunday, August 16th, 2026, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. in Israel. But if you can't make it, you should still register because you'll get an email to your inbox that contains the link to the full webinar. You can watch the full webinar on your own time, so it doesn't matter if you can't make the time. But this coming Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, August 16th, Mamdani's New York City, a warning to America. And our panel is amazing. We have former mayor of New York, Rudy Giuliani. We have Shabbos Kestenbaum, a great author and commentator on PragerU. We have Robert Spencer, the prolific author about Islam and founder of jihadwatch.org, Robert Spencer. And then we have Rabbi Daniel Schoenbach, Rabbi for America. He's also a very prominent therapist in the New York area and has been at the forefront of defending the Jewish community against the Mamdani regime, been part of an anti-Mamdani coalition that's growing in New York, been really on the forefront, the front lines of all that. They're going to be joining us for this amazing webinar, and make sure that you're registered. You can register at the link in the description of this video, or you can go to Israel365.com/Mamdani, or you can scan the QR code that is on your screen. So you don't want to miss the webinar. Make sure you sign up. Okay, let's get back to what we're talking about here in Lebanon. This next item is about the financial war against Hezbollah. Very interesting piece that ran just 2 days ago in Ynet. It's mostly quoting a New York Times piece. Not just missiles, the silent war that is draining Hezbollah's coffers. When Israel launched its new war against Hezbollah last March, the first targets the IDF warned would be attacked were not missile depots or underground command centers, they were banks. Israeli fighter jets destroyed more than a dozen branches of Al-Qard al-Hassan. Bank branches they went after. The financial institution associated with Hezbollah that has for years been described as the terrorist organization's de facto bank. Money changers that Israel said were used by Iran to transfer funds to Hezbollah were later attacked, as were gas stations that generated revenue for the organization. The message, according to an extensive New York Times report published Sunday, was clear. Israel is no longer satisfied with striking Hezbollah's military arsenal. It also seeks to hit the money that enables the group to pay fighters, rebuild infrastructure, transfer compensation, and operate the extensive welfare network on which its support among Lebanon's Shiite public has relied for decades. And summer camps, like we just saw. The strikes are only part of a broader campaign being waged by Israel and the United States, with growing cooperation from the Lebanese government aimed at blocking Hezbollah's funding channels, especially those leading from Iran. According to documents reviewed by the newspaper and interviews with Lebanese, American, and Israeli officials, as well as people inside Hezbollah, the organization is now facing the most severe financial pressure it has experienced in years. Excellent. At the same time, the Times emphasized that Hezbollah's financial system is highly secretive, so it remains unclear how deeply the campaign has damaged its overall operations. Hezbollah and Iran have previously shown an ability to adapt to pressure, recover militarily, and find new ways to keep money flowing, meaning the campaign is far from decided. The distress is already being felt on the ground. Hezbollah officials and recipients of the organization's assistance said that while salaries for tens of thousands of its fighters are still mostly being paid, some social services have already been reduced as the organization is forced to prioritize its spending. Hezbollah's problem is especially acute because for decades it built a kind of state within a state in Lebanon, a system that fed, housed, and paid its supporters, operated schools, hospitals, a communication network, generated revenue from gas stations and pharmaceutical companies, and with Iranian funding amassed an arsenal stronger than that of the Lebanese army. That social system has been a central element of Hezbollah's power since its founding in 1982, and over the years turned it into the crown jewel of Iran's proxy network in the Middle East. Now, however, Hezbollah is being forced to direct more and more resources towards restoring its military capabilities after Israeli attacks exacted a heavy price. The organization's spokesman, Yusuf Al-Zain, acknowledged in May that Hezbollah had stopped compensation payments it had promised to supporters whose homes were damaged or destroyed. That's so dangerous for them domestically. They promised compensation for its supporters who were living in those areas that ended up getting struck, and they haven't been able to pay. While it tried to deal with the needs of hundreds of thousands of people displaced by the war, after the 2024 campaign, Hezbollah announced that Al-Qard al-Hassan would distribute $12,000 to $14,000 each to families whose homes had been destroyed, but the payments were repeatedly delayed and eventually stopped entirely. The scale of the battle's demands and displacement have placed significant burdens on Hezbollah. Al-Zain said, according to him, resources are now being managed according to priority. He insisted that the organization is capable of withstanding the pressure, but acknowledged there is undoubtedly pressure. Hassan, a taxi driver from southern Lebanon, whose daughter was married to a Hezbollah fighter killed in the recent war, told the Times that she still receives the stipend intended for the families of fallen fighters, but that the organization no longer funds certain medical procedures. He himself, like thousands of Hezbollah supporters whose homes were destroyed, is still waiting for the compensation he was promised. He's not getting it. According to U.S. State Department estimate from before the war, Iran transferred, listen to this, Iran transferred around $700 million to Hezbollah each year, most of an annual budget estimated at about $1 billion. According to the Lebanese, American, and Israeli officials, Tehran even increased its financial assistance to the organization over the past year. Let me remind you that the 12-day war is over a year ago. And that means that while their economy was in a shambles so bad that it led to mass protests towards the end of the year, people did not have water, did not have electricity. And what did the Iranian regime do with the money they got when after the 12-day war, Trump lifted some of the sanctions and allowed them to sell their oil? They sent $1 billion to Hezbollah. The cost of the war, reconstruction, and care for hundreds of thousands of displaced people have swollen to such an extent that even those sums are no longer enough to cover Hezbollah's needs. The campaign against Hezbollah's sources of funding accelerated in late 2024, shortly after a U.S.-mediated ceasefire halted the previous war with Israel. The regime of Bashar Assad in Syria fell, a development that left Hezbollah more isolated from Tehran than ever. Because for years, Syria served as the main land route for transferring weapons and money from Iran to Lebanon. With that route severed, because the Assad regime fell, that route was cut off, Tehran was forced to quickly look for alternative ways to fund the organization. According to a U.S. official and senior Lebanese official, one of the main channels was Beirut's International Airport, which for years was effectively operated under Hezbollah control and was used to transfer money and weapons from Iran. Early last year, hold on a second. It just jumped down. Here we go. Early last year, U.S. officials passed to the Lebanese government an Israeli warning that Iran was sending suitcases loaded with dollars and cash to Hezbollah on civilian flights to Beirut, and in some cases even through Iranian diplomats. Following the warning, this is unbelievable. Their people were starving, and they're shipping plane loads of cash into Beirut. Unbelievable. Lebanon suspended all flights. So following that warning, Lebanon suspended all flights from Iran, and the measure remains in force. So there's no flights from Iran to Lebanon anymore. Airport employees identified with Hezbollah were removed from their posts. They were fired. And the authorities stationed security personnel there who operate in coordination with U.S. officials. This is very interesting. So they got rid of all the Hezbollah personnel in the airport, and they now coordinate with U.S. officials, making sure that nothing comes in from Iran. Washington then turned its attention to Lebanon's central bank, an institution that operated for years under limited oversight. Lebanon's economy is largely cash-based, and according to the U.S. Treasury Department, Hezbollah exploited the system to launder illicit funds and transfer money from Iran. According to the New York Times, the Trump administration also worked to influence the appointment of a new central bank governor. The governor who was chosen, Karim Suwaid, quickly proved that he was willing to act against Hezbollah. He removed or fired senior officials suspected of ties to the organization, ordered his office search for listening devices, and refused to use computers provided by the bank out of concern he was being monitored. The central bank later opened an investigation into the country's large financial services companies on suspicion that Hezbollah had used them to transfer funds. Since then, Lebanese authorities have tightened oversight of money transfers. Brian Nelson, a former senior U.S. Treasury official who was responsible for sanctions against Hezbollah during the Biden administration, said the organization was able to generate significant amounts of money on a continuous basis through the abuse of these networks. Hezbollah rejects the allegations, and the organization's media office calls these claims baseless. As the large money transfer companies came under tighter scrutiny, Hezbollah relied more heavily on a less regulated network of money changers. According to senior Israeli security official and another person familiar with the organization's financial system, that network quickly became the main channel through which Iran currently funds Hezbollah. The money passes from Iran through the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, and Iraq through Hawala, in an informal mechanism of transfers between intermediaries in which the cash itself does not have to cross borders. So these other Arab countries are aiding and abetting the Iranians getting money over to Hezbollah through the financial networks. Last November, the U.S. Treasury Department announced, as part of sanctions imposed on Lebanese money changers, that Iran had already managed that year to funnel about $1 billion to Hezbollah, most of it through the Hawala system. One of the sanctioned money changers, Hassan Mukalled, who the U.S. Treasury described as a key financial advisor to Hezbollah, acknowledged that international pressure makes it harder to transfer funds, but said the organization is adapting. In a country like Lebanon, where there's large amounts of cash, there are always possibilities. Hezbollah has meanwhile been forced to search for additional sources of money. In February, the U.S. Treasury Department said officials at Al-Qard al-Hassan had established a network of gold trading companies in an effort to raise cash. Account books reviewed by the New York Times and assessment by analysts who track Hezbollah's cash economy indicated that gold sales increased over the past year. So they're selling gold. According to Israeli and American officials, one reason was that Israeli strikes destroyed a significant portion of Hezbollah's foreign currency and gold reserves. At the same time, Lebanon barred banks and brokerage firms in the country from doing business with Al-Qard al-Hassan, pushing it even further away from the former financial system. The Trump administration is now pressing the Lebanese government to shut the institution down entirely. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese, many of them Hezbollah supporters, have relied for years on Al-Qard al-Hassan for interest-free loans, war compensation, and other financial services. The institution presents itself as a charitable loan association rather than a bank, and its director has previously claimed that Hezbollah's own funds are managed separately. Okay, I know that was a long article, but look at what is going on here. We see that there is a serious move. There's been a lot going on. I didn't know about a lot of this stuff, but you see what the Israelis have been doing, what the Americans have been doing. They're choking out Hezbollah's money as much as they can. But meanwhile, the Iranian regime is still finding ways to get money to them. This only underscores the fact that the only real way to end the proxy network is to get rid of the Iranian regime. See, it's all about cutting off the pipeline of cash. Yes, will there still be illicit terrorist activity? This whole international network is not just going to vanish if the Iranian regime falls, but it will be so much weaker. It won't have its main oxygen, its main source of funding. So with all of these, put this together with economic fury going on, with the economic pressure being placed on the Iranian regime right now, and this is actually quite significant. So we might, with all of the talk about the pilot zones and Israeli withdrawal and what's going to happen with Hezbollah and the Hezbollah summer camp and they're recruiting people, they're also being choked out more and more and more by the authorities in Lebanon in coordination with the Israelis and the Americans. That doesn't mean that they're going to be easy to deal with. There's a lot of Shiites, a lot of pro-Hezbollah people, and a lot of weapons in Lebanon. There are many pro-Hezbollah members of the Lebanese armed forces. There could end up being a civil war in Lebanon over this. Let's not ignore that possibility. Yeah, I thought this was a fascinating article about all the things that are being done to choke out Hezbollah, and we can only hope for the best in that regard. All right, thanks for watching. God bless.